across anybody who'd been at the college at that stage? Anybody else? Any of you, the guys who you were with college originally, for example?
Not really, and that's a good question. But most of them had gone their separate ways. So a guy, Dougal, I forget his side name, he went on to become a surgeon or something in Sweden for some reason or another. And I saw years later, we inserts once in a blue moon from, they write a letter into Pipe Times and that sort of thing. Evan Mackay, who was a real character. Evan was a son of a regiment, I think it was Cameron Highlanders and all this kind of carry on, but his father had died and his mother, Delina Mackay, who was a real character, she was treasurer or something like that, and it's Flora McNeil, the secretary, or the treasurer of the Scottish Pipers'Persuasion Association, and they had various club nights and they had recitals and all the rest of it, and old Highlanders and Delina and Flora were there for many decades at the Blue Rinses. They just sat at the door and took the money and all the rest of it. Famous tune Delina Mackay was composed after Delina, and the band played it a few years ago in the competition.
Folk like that are on the periphery are important though to the bands, allowing the bands to get on with what they do.
Aye, but so that was the connection with College of Pipe. No, pupils not really, because none of them went to pipe bands, as maybe alluded to,
So is that indicative then of it sort of justifies what you were saying earlier on?
Aye, yeah. So a lot of them had just piping had been a hobby, a temporary hobby, and never continued it. Other ones just went their own way and all the rest of it. But very few of them did I come across, except for Evan, ever so briefly. Evan played in a couple of competitions when he must have been 18, 19, 20, but was never heard of again. He joined the Glasgow Police when, I don't know, it might have been 22, he did a brief flurry with the army for a week and decided didn't like it. He did an aversion to khaki. That was his words. And he joined the police, and then he did a probation period of maybe, say, 3 years, didn't like the police pipe band, didn't like the set-up, and disappeared away to Hong Kong, and the policing in Hong Kong. I first came across Evan, going back to the College of Piping again. We did the summer schools, and the first summer school I went to, I was about 13, and it was in Dunvegan. No, it was Carbist in Skye, near to Portree. And we sat there, and we get all sorts of lessons. The practice chanter, Seamus McNeil ran it. I think Pearson might have been there, but for a change it was run properly. And we were getting lessons every day, morning, afternoon. Also there was other stuff going on, had you out walks, healthy walks and everything, even in swimming and the cold water. But it was in this primary school, and it was quite damp, Glasgow Fair, usual rain, and the plain bread was turning mouldy. They didn't have any fridges or anything at that time, and they had never seen mouldy bread, and it was quite, the food was atrocious, of course, because it was lassies from the Doe School in Glasgow that were doing the cooking, and they were just learners as well. So this is how it worked. But we weren't paying masses of money for this, and I don't think the college charged us fees learning. So he just went and got on with it, and that was it. I did a fortnight there, very, very good. But Evan Mackay being Evan, the first day his mother had given him plenty of pocket money, unlike the rest of us, and he went up to the local shop. They bought all the confectionery, all the sweets, and the chocolate and everything else, and they cleaned the place out. And he brought the lot back and proceeded to sell it to everybody else that was in the school at twice the price.
Enterprise, eh?
Aye. So, but that was Evan, you know, and he was knocking about the various summer schools. They did another one. As twice at Dunvegan, once when I was younger, just after that one. The following one's Tyree, and no, there was it Tyree, and then Tobermory, and that was where I come across Ronnie Morrison, who taught me my first Piobaireachd when I was 16. At Tobermory, the school up in the top of the hill. Tullachard was the name of the tune, and then his brother Fred, that's Fred Morrison's father. So old Fred was teaching and taught us the Piobaireachd too long in this condition. That was about 3 days later, about 3 days after that. I learned Big Piobaireachd, I went for McSwan of Roig. All these tunes are still playing it. And so it was a good start to Piobaireachd in my life. That's where I started, and I really enjoyed playing Piobaireachd. But Norrie Gillis couldn't teach Piobaireachd properly. He was a light music man, marches, spades and reels, hornpipes, jigs. So I lost out in that to a certain extent.
Have you got to choose really, which direction you want to go in?
You try and do everything.
Aye.
And when I was in the police pipe band, Ronnie Laurie, who was a good Piobaireachd player, would try and teach me a couple of tunes. But I was learning the band tunes, and I was also learning my own stuff as well. So there's quite a lot. And then you're married, and you've got a family, and you're working, and time goes on, and time's limited actually.
Just you were talking about you were doing your own stuff, and you were doing the band stuff as well. Just going back again to the piping school, when you first set out, and you were saying, there was a lot of emphasis. It was all about what you can do, and they weren't really interested in putting you into a band. Do you think that benefited you at that point, because somebody who just got straight into a band would have...
It didn't do me any harm, but I think that largely depended on who was in charge of what band. And a particularly good example of this is, there was a pipe band called the 214 BB pipe band in Scotland, in Glasgow. And they started off pipers and drummers, and every one of them, just about, it seems to me, became famous. Solo pipers and leaders in pipe bands. Ian McLaren went there, Sterling McMurtry, a drummer, went there, Alec Connell, drummer, went there ever so briefly. It was a season or so, then went to Clan McRae. But all the guys that went, there was a chap, McIver, who was in charge of the 214 BB pipe band, and he insisted on strictly on very, very good technique and appreciation how to set up the instrument and everything else. So these guys got a better grounding in the 214 BB pipe band than what I got in the College of Piping. So and I could quote you other instances. Muirhead Pipe Band, Bobby Hardy was a pipe major there, and he taught many of the members of his band Piobaireachd, March of Spain, reel playing, solo playing and all this. So they went to this pipe major Bobby Hardy for years. So the band did them good as well as, so there was no conflict at all. and folk were taught properly, that you play slower tempos maybe in your MSRs with a solo piping than what you would with a drum corps at your back and a band. So they were taught the difference, and they were taught to appreciate the difference, so there's no conflict. I already alluded to Robert Wallace, and Robert Wallace, he is more or less the leading light in the Pipers'Persuasion Society. And I attended one of the conferences just a few years ago, and I was still at Burnham, and a very nice time there. I made a presentation there about where Pipers'Persuasion were going, modern compositions and one thing and another. And it's a video presentation that went down well, and that was on behalf of the Pipers'Persuasion. That episode is in the collection. I did a couple of things for him. Also attended the dinner, and Andrew Wright was running the wee concert at night. So I ended up playing a Piobaireachd there, Too Long This Condition, black tie event. That was recorded. Somebody gave me the recording, and I quite liked it. I played reasonably well. There's wee bits and pieces here and there, as there always is, but the instrument was quite good. I went to a couple of recent conferences, met people from all over the world. Mike Cusack attended, as a German guy, Uwe, who's a retired general in the German army who loves Piobaireachd. We've had a couple of drinks together and some very, very interesting conversations, nothing to do with piping. But meet really nice people, and I was able to play a couple of tunes there reasonably well. But the thing about the Pipers'Persuasion Society is, with these conferences, it's made me study Piobaireachd, made me listen to Piobaireachd properly, and really listen and learn new tunes and brush up old tunes. So that's what I've been doing with my piping over the last 2-3 years, concentrating on vastly improving my knowledge, appreciation, and my playing of Piobaireachd. And that's the Pipers'Persuasion Society.
With piping, there is this tradition of passing it on to, passing it down through the generations.
Oh yes, aye. William McCallum, for instance, and Stuart Liddell took their great piping, when the top guys in the world, all from fathers and uncles and great and grandfathers and this, that, next thing, Argyll pipers, famous Argyll pipers, and they just took everything that they know from these forebears, and much to their great success to this day, and they are passing on what they know. They're both teaching in various places.
As you are as well.
Well, I'm only teaching beginners and stuff like that, but I like to think that I'm giving proper tuition and I don't miss a trick, because when you're teaching beginners, you're seeing all the mistakes they're making, whereas it's difficult to express this. If you're teaching a top piper, you're more or less interested, largely interested in how they're playing the tune in terms of tempo, phrasing, music, and their instrument, one thing or another, but they're taking it for granted that you've mastered the basics way back, so they're not taking you back to basics.
It's more of a kind of coaching, mentoring kind of thing at that level.
Aye. So they're listening and say, well, you know, you could lower the tempo here, or you could ease that, and that bit in the last bar there, keep bring that out and point that, or cut it, or whatever, you see, and it's point of cutting notes. Whereas I can sit and listen, and I can hear catches and mistakes and basic technique. And I like to think that I'm interested in that, and as far as the teaching folk are concerned, but I'd encourage folk to go to Willie McCallum, for instance, you know, and various others for to make them top class competitors, if you like. Everybody's got to go to Sunday just for an ear, if nothing else, you know, and say, right, you're playing that too fast, you're not phrasing that right, this, that, and the next thing. And your mind tells you lies. The only thing that tells you the truth is a recorder. If you record yourself playing, listening back, I didn't do that enough.
And you've got to listen to yourself objectively as well.
Oh, aye. But when you're actually playing, you don't hear what you think you're playing well, but you're not. And it's a psychological thing. I don't know many times Stuart McCallum and I have discussed this. And we used the band, that was another thing. I get tied up with the band again through Plunkett and the Chanters thing. He phoned up and says, how would you like to come and help out the band? I says, well, what? He says, the tune drones. So I ended up tuning the drones for the Strathclyde Police Band for 15 years and gone to all the competitions, all the band practices and everything else. And I get quite adept at that. The big heavy competitions, I could zoom round with the meter, but I also had a good ear. And I could hear a drone that was out from just a fair distance away, and I just walk out and give it a tweak, whatever.
So all these competitions and all of this, again, you know, you're developing your contacts, you're developing so on. That then leads you on to this, presumably Pipers'Persuasion, or when did you get the idea to start doing this?
I was doing road shows with McCallum's because it was an advertising thing that Kenny had dreamt up. So we did the road shows and we're meeting all sorts of folk. Willie McCallum, Stuart Liddell and various others would play at these road shows and go places like Brittany, like Mulhausen in Germany, like Zurich in Switzerland. We started off doing Newcastle, and we did up in Inverness, we did Campbellton as well, but we were meeting all sorts of older pipers and everything else, and I was always mindful, and I was always meeting with that and the solo competitions I went to, just more as a spectator than anything else, so I was keep touch. And then Ronnie Laurie died, John Burgess died, two world famous guys, you know, great raconteurs. They filmed books, the two of them, you know, the stories. And around in 2010, I had a conversation with Rob Wallace, if you like, who was principal of College of Piping at that time. I said, oh, I've not got any money. I says, I'm not up for money, so I'm just up for a conversation. So he suggested that I do some field reporting. I think you'll know the expression better now, well, but he was suggesting I go out with a recorder or something and just interview folk and see what I could do with it. Mm-hmm. And that was a suggestion, nothing more than that. But I went back and I spoke to various people, and I got a chap, Curry, who was willing to, and he did build me a website also a friend of my son's, Paul Russell, cameraman, and Paul, very, very good. So he did the camera work, and I gave the product to Curry, who put it on the website that he built, and I had the easy job. I just talked to folk and asked them questions and stuff like that, you know. But the two of them got a wee bit fed up. They had their own thing to do, so all of a sudden I had to learn how to work and edit stuff and all this for the website. Curry, very, very good. Gave it to me chapter and verse. I recorded it all, wrote it down, and went back home, rehearsed it, and steps to carry out. Also, Paul, he got a wee bit fed up with the camera, what they don't think they do, so to get a hold of a camera and to learn how to work camera. Lots of mistakes, sound and vision for the first wee while, and as usual I spoke too much, and he interrupted as well. That was the other thing, the bad fault I had. But my excuse about that was I was never so mindful of time, and if folk spoke, I was going to end up about 3 or 4 hours of thing, so I was trying to steer them in a certain direction, so that was my excuse. Anyway, it seems to be successful over the years. I think I improved my technique right across the board with editing, with the camera work, and I learned very quickly that sound is king. Without sound, you've got nothing. The worst video in the world, you get away with it, but you don't get away with bad sound because folk will just switch off. You've got to be able to understand clearly what's going on and find it interesting as well.
There must be several notable interviews that you've done, noteworthy interviews that you've done.
They're all very good. Some of them are obscure, and I see, you know, you can look and see who's watched what to a certain extent, and some of them, the folks, through their own prejudices, Willie Donaldson, for instance, gave a great interview in my thing. Nobody watched it because nobody liked Willie Donaldson's message. Now, Willie is what's it, MIT or something, through in America, and is a doctor of philosophy or something, you see.
Mm.
And I asked him, I says, where are you a doctor of? He says, certainly no medicine. He says, you know. So, but he gave a very coherent explanation how the situations regarded peer books and the direction peer tuition had gone in and everything else should be flung out the window. All the books should be scrapped. They were all nonsense. And he'd studied it all at Edinburgh, and he come to this conclusion. And Willie writes books, Willie does research, Willie's a highly intelligent guy. He did all this work, published a book, and everybody said it was rubbish. Right? And well-known Pipers to this day say it's rubbish. So nobody will sit down and watch Willie.
Mm.
But I thought, and funny enough, Lieutenant Colonel David Murray, who gave a great interview, David Murray down at Bristol, Marion now went all the way down to Bristol to see this guy, and it was well worth the journey, can I tell you. Great interview. But he was one of the few that praised Willie Donaldson, held up his book and said, that's the Bible. So
it's a matter of perception, isn't
but
it?
David Murray had gone through to Edinburgh into the same archives and had arrived at the same conclusion. Funnily enough, another guy, Allan MacDonald, who everybody says is rubbish and won't watch his thing, he gave a great second interview. The first one we weren't comfortable with. at the National Piping Centre. We never get into the groove. He asked me to take it down. I says, I will take it down. I didn't like it either. So I went to his house. He gave a great interview. And he had studied again. Seamus McNeill had given him money to go and produce a paper on Piobaireachd and doing it. So he did all the studies that these other two, Donaldson and Murray, had done, and he arrived at the same conclusion, right? And he started to play the stuff the way it should be played in his way of thinking, and he won the clasp doing that. But who was the judge? David Murray. So you know, you've got this school of thought that these guys are talking rubbish and everything else, and they should be discarded now. There's names come into my head immediately who are household names who will say to me if they were sitting here, it is rubbish, you know, and there's guys passed on now who they've done a lot of studies of their own over the years, and they've got books and books and books on the subject of Piobaireachd, and they will argue vociferously their corner that there's none the matter with books, it's just a matter of interpretation, and it's a matter of who's showing you the tune and putting the final touches to it and all the rest of it. And the scuttlebutt is the book's only there as a guide, the notes on the page, but you've got to get the music from somebody else, your teacher or whatever, you know, or listen to big recordings.
Pipers'Persuasion appeals to people not of a Piper's Persuasion as well. For example, I'm thinking about the regular interview.
Oh aye. So I've mentioned these three guys with Piobaireachd, but there was the pipe band guys and all the rest of it, and a fantastic interview. A great interview of the first one I did was Ian McClellan, and how he steered the Strathclyde Police Pipe Band right through to winning all the world championships and everything else, and how he went about it. Very matter of factly and everything else. Then later on, you see who've I not got, and I was introduced to Eric Rigler by Stuart McCallum at Inverary one day, and I said, I'd like to speak to you on Pipers'Persuasion. No bother. So about a year later, he graciously gave me his time on Zoom. He's sitting in California, and I'm sitting here, and we did a fantastic interview. Very, very good indeed. Well worth watching. And we had a wee bit time off camera, just at the end. Fun enough, I left the camera running, right? Because I'd learned that the best stories are always told after the interview's completed, you know. And they told us about the second marriage and how it was celebrated. And then I said, I got in touch and I said, do you mind if I include that? I said, I know I told you you were off camera, so I'm asking your permission. And he graciously gave me his permission just to include that story in, you know. But terrific. The other guys, pipe makers, Shepherd, who's now passed on, very, very good. A great interview. He was a maths teacher, I think, earlier on in life. Great teacher of kids and everything else. Fantastic pipe bands. And good pipes, good chanters, great reeds, everything, all the rest of it. And my brother was through work camera, and I was speaking to him through in his factory, did the interview. Says, right, that's us. Says, would you like some lunch with sandwiches, cup of tea, sitting? You know, he told much, much better stories. You know, over the sandwiches and everything else. The only thing, he was using a lot of swearing words, but he was off camera, you know. But it's a lesson. What do? You know, do you leave the camera running? But politeness, you can't do that. Really, you've got to. If when you say it's off, it should be off. You know. But occasionally, if there's a mistake made, but I don't include that. I would never include anything. Once I tell folk that that's it, then they could say what they like after that, and then I would need to ask their permission to include something. And it's only rarely I've done that, and that was a regular one, you know.
You've spoken about a few people who have passed, and you know, and you're talking about archiving the Pipers'Persuasion, getting into some national or international archive kind of thing, and it's been described by Dr Dr Forrest up at Sabble Monastery as the single most important resource for oral heritage. That must make you quite proud.
Aye, you see that is trying to bottom me up because you get it for nothing, I don't know. But no, it's nice that you don't do this for recognition. Folk go out and buy golf clubs, go and play golf very badly. I don't play golf, I just bought some cameras and sound equipment and I do this, and it's a hobby. And if it's helpful to folk out in the boondocks and all over the world, folk get touched with it. And also, if I'm at the Glenfiddich, somebody comes up, tugs your sleeve and say, very good, Pipers'Persuasion, terrific, I thoroughly enjoyed this, that and the next thing. Well, that's the sort of accolades that you're kind of, so it encourages you to move on and keep going. And most of the places I go to, people have heard of it, have watched it, and enjoyed it. And we try and get a few laughs while we're doing it. And I was at Robert Barnes last week, still to go up on site, and Robert and I had a right good laugh, so that's a good one. Other ones, a wee bit more academic, Jeannie Campbell, that's the next one to go, finished that. But Jeannie's she's an author, she's into books, and it's a totally different complexion again. And then you got a pipe man like Donald Mackay, did him on Monday, Strathclyde Police, Scottish Power, everything else, the Army before that, so that was interesting too, so that's kind of run the mill, but it's still forming links between the other episodes that you like, so it's almost like one big giant jigsaw where names are mentioned here, they're mentioned there, and the jigsaw's all fitting together for people who in America enjoy watching it. South Africa, I was at the last Pipers'Society conference, and a chap from South Africa sitting next to me having dinner, and he's watched it and he enjoys it. And a chap from Singapore, he had another piper contact me at their Gershire gathering, so I ended up a Zoom call through to Singapore, and that was interesting as well. Germany, 2 or 3 folk, Germany, there's folk in Brittany. I've interviewed Patrick Mullard, who studied with Bobs of Balmoral, very famous teachers of piping, and Patrick's no slouch as far as a piper's concerned. A very literal guy, he's a teacher, and a very good interview. But I would like to think that people would look at these, I wouldn't say obscure, just they're there. Mm-hmm. So look up ones that Mike Cusack was an early one from Texas, but I got him when he was across with his band. Stirling for the World Pipe Band Championships was birthed at Stirling, just to travel down to Glasgow. So Mike Cusack gave me an early interview. The vision's not great, but it sounds perfect. It's fine, you know. So,
it's just important to get it recorded, all of these things recorded.
With COVID, I was wondering, because you get nothing done with COVID, you know, I said, how can I overcome this? So I had to research, and I came up with Zoom, and I muddled through. The first one was the John Walsh, I think it was, and then you and I did Tommy Anderson, who was just along the road a wee bit in Canada. And that was a difficult one because he wasn't the internet, the pure internet, wasn't it? That was it.
That was the one we had to get the college kids over there, which was good for them.
The college, there was sound and vision at college, they learned at that college.
And one of them was a piper, one of the girls was a piper.
No, the principal went along and set out the whole thing, and it worked, you know. But after these first two difficult ones, it became easier for me to work Zoom, and I was on to Brazil, and a very good interview, a chap, Ken Eller, who's just recently died. Ken said, you'll need to go into this chap in Brazil. So all of a sudden life became easier, you know, just California, Brazil, Canada, Germany, Singapore.
You're pushing open doors once you've got the thing off the ground.
Aye, but it's great, you know, because it opened up the thing worldwide rather than face to face.